Okay, so let's talk about Metaballs and creating this hibernation capsule using Metaballs. And we'll learn a few things about them. So first, as you may know, we start with a blank scene, Shift A, and we're going to go into Metaball. And I'm going to start off with an ellipsoid, zoom out, and I'll go to the top view, turn on orthographic projection, and let's just stretch this out a little bit. And I'm going to rotate it, R, Z, 90. Something like that. And then we'll go back to the top view and notice how rough the resolution is. And I can fix that by going over here into my Metaball properties, and I'll change this to 0.1, much smoother. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to grab from KitOps my Ergo robot guy, and I'm going to leave auto scale off and select nothing and then add insert. And then I'm going to rotate him. And let's slide him back into the middle, and we'll kind of go to, let's go to our side view, and let's kind of put him in the center. So that's kind of our robot guy. So that gives us an idea. We can scale this guy down to fit him, and that looks about right. Let's see. Go into smart mode, make sure yeah, let's do that. Okay, so there's this. So I'm going to just move this around until I get it to about where I think that capsule will look about right. So that's it. So there's our first Metaball. And then I'm going to Shift A and I'm going to say Metaball, and I'm going to add a plane. And I'll go to the top view and I'm going to scale this plane down, and I'm going to move it off to here, something like this, and scale it down some more. Now it's not very sharp. And so how do I make this sharper? So I'm going to tab into it, and I'm going to scale it down much more so it is sharp. And then I'm going to tab back out, and now I can scale it up, and I'm going to maintain that sharpness. Can you see what I just did? So then I'll drag it in here, and I'll just, I want to basically set it up so that it looks something like this. And now I want to mirror this. I can just Shift D, or I can actually Alt D, which is making a direct copy of it, so that anything I'm edit in one side, I'm going to edit on the other side. And then I'll go over to my item, and in my Y direction, I'll hover over here and I'll hit the minus key up on, not in the numpad, but up on across the numbers. There you go. And that just puts it there. And then I can also, if I end up scaling this or something, like for instance, if I wanted to rotate this, I'll select this and say RZ and rotate it. And notice it doesn't rotate here. So if I want that rotation to be correct for this one, then I'll just need to have to copy that and go over here and say paste, and then just hit the negative button again. And so that'll do that. So I'm going to undo all that, but that gives you an idea. Another thing that's kind of cool about this is if I tab into this, this Metaball right over here. So let's Alt Z, and I want to, do something with it, like move it. Notice that they both move together, but I don't want it. I want it to be mirroring, right? So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to come back out, tab back out, and I will select this one. I can just hit the minus key in front of all these scales, just like that. And then when I go over to this first one and tab into it, and if I want to move it, you'll see that they both are moving together. It's kind of like a modifier, but you can, of course, add modifiers to Metaballs. But this kind of works in a similar way. Move this in just a little bit. Let's kind of say this is what we want. This is our surface. Let's tab in out of it. I'm gonna grab this one here and move it, just slim it down just a little bit, something like that. So that's going to be our surface. So how do we convert this into a capsule that we can now start working on? Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to convert this to a mesh so that we can then edit it. And of course I can't do that while it's Metaballs. So I'll select it and go Object, and I'll say Apply Visual Geometry to Mesh. Now the problem with this is if I look at this, you see it's not very high resolution. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to go back into my Metaballs, and instead of 0.1, I'm going to say 0.02. Now look how much higher resolution that is. It's a much higher resolution model. It looks a lot better. And now I'll do the same thing. Apply Visual Geometry to Mesh. And now we can see that we have quite a nice mesh to begin work with, but it's 86,000 faces. I'd really like to get it down to 5,000. So let's talk about that. So there's a couple ways that we can actually remesh this. There's 3 ways, and let me show you the ways that come with Blender. So the first way is, let's tab into this and let's make sure that we've identified that this is symmetrical about the X, Y, and Z axis. Now your model may not be, but this one is, so we're going to leave that alone. And with that done, I will go into the remesh and I'll hit this quad button and click Quadraflow, and I'll use mesh symmetry. And then I'll say, I can preserve mesh boundary, maybe smooth normals. That's probably a good idea. And 4,000 faces looks good, and I'll hit OK. But notice what happened. It really kind of screwed it up. So let's undo that, and let's do it again. And let's turn off this and say OK. And now it's going to process down below, and now it looks a lot better. And you're thinking, okay, well, that's pretty good. But if I look at the wireframe of this, we'll see that it's not quite perfect. And so what I can do if I want to get this a little more perfect than that is I can come in here and I can say add a modifier, and I'm going to add a mirror modifier to this, and I'm going to basically go completely across here and bisect this. So I'm basically bisecting it so that I get all these tops, the front, the back, and the side. So now I've got a symmetry around it. Now the problem with that is I have some of this that we're going to have to manually go in and fix. But let's go ahead and just do that right now and say apply. And now I am going to tab into this, and we can see that I'm going to want to merge some of these vertices, right? So if I go into one, I can just say here, merge at center, merge at center. So I'm going to just do this, and here we go, merge at center and merge at center. And then we'll come over on this side and I'll do the same. Okay, let's just leave it like this for now. So I've really just fixed this one quadrant. That's the positive X and the positive Y and the positive Z. So if I tab into this and add another mirror modifier, and then you'll see that we have basically fixed the problem that we had earlier. And with that done, I'll just say apply all. And now we have our very nice ready to go mesh. And then of course I can say Control 1 and give myself another subdivision if I want to work with it as I start to add more detail to this. So that's basically how we converted this mesh. Okay, let's talk about another way to remesh. So let's first go into our Metaballs here, show our wireframe, go to Metaballs, and I'm going to make this 0.01, make it very high density mesh. And then we'll go Object, Apply Visual Geometry to Mesh. And once we've done that, then we'll go in and we're going to add a modifier, and we're going to add a remesh modifier. And you can see what that did. And I'm going to turn on smooth shading. And this isn't a bad setting, actually 0.01. Let's try 0.05. So you can see that does a pretty good job too, but faces are 11,000. So let's try 0.08. And now we have faces on about 5,000. So if I look at this without the wireframe, you see it's actually pretty good. And then if I go ahead and Control 1 to add a subdivision surface, we'll see that works pretty well too. We have pretty dense wireframe on that. So I'm going to stick with the first way. I'm going to show you the one last way to do it, and actually it's the way that I prefer to do it, but it's not one that you need to do it because it uses an external add-on. So let's go ahead and revert this, and this again will go in and convert this to a mesh, and there it is. And what I'll do is I'm going to go into Quad Remesher, and this is a expensive add-on. I think it's like $100. It's the same remesher that's being used in ZBrush though, so it's a pretty fancy mesher. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave the default settings on, other than I'm going to choose Symmetrize XYZ, and I can set this to 4,000 like we did before actually, and just leave everything else the way it is, and then just say remesh it. Okay, and look how nice that is. There's no extra touch up anything required whatsoever, it's perfect. So that's why I prefer using this quad remesher. But I also showed you 2 other ways that you can use the built-in remeshers that come with Blender. Choose whichever you want. I'm going to continue with the very first example that we used. Okay, we're back at the very first one. And one of the things I did not do is I did not apply the rotation and the scale when I started mirroring this. And so I got some more weird vertices. And so I went ahead and cleaned it up, and now we're in really good shape. It's not the perfect remeshing, but it's pretty good. So once we have here, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to try and cut parts of this out. And so what we want to do is we're going to create parting lines that will separate out the different parts of this chamber. So I've turned back on the robot. We can see that it's laying down, and we may want to have some kind of opening area, door, or something that pivots up or something like that. So to do that, what we'll do is I'll turn off the wireframe. I'm going to say Shift A, and I'm going to create a mesh, and it's a plane. And with that plane, I'll tab into it, and I'll go into the vertex mode, and I'll say M for merge and merge at center. And now I have this vertice at the center, and I am just going to drag it down so you can see it's right here. So now it's in front of it. So what I want to do is let's move it over here, and I can just sketch out very quickly E here, E, Z, I'm sorry, E, Y. Y is E for extrude Y. And I'm just going to sketch out very quickly a kind of a door, E, Z, up. And that's really it. So if you look at this, you can see that this is going to be a door, a parting line for the door that as we cut through there. Let's move it over here, and then we can select both of these and hit F, and that'll close that lid for us, because we're going to use that later. Now I want to put some radiuses in here, so I'm going to grab these 3 vertices, and I'm going to give them, let's say a 0.5 mean bevel weight, and then we'll add a modifier called bevel, and we'll make it vertices, and we're going to set the limit method to weight, and maybe give it 6, so you can see now how that looks. Now just use this to adjust it a little bit so that we have something that looks something like that, as you can see. Now tab out of this, and there is our shape that we're going to use to cut that very first line. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a screw modifier, and the settings here are going to be 0 for the angle. Screw is probably, let's try 2, but basically what you're seeing is how far up that's going to go. I want to go in the X direction, not the Z direction. And maybe I want to make this -2, yeah, something like that, or actually, I didn't even, -1 maybe. I'll get it. Anyway, we just need to cut all the way through. So there we have that, and that's exactly what we want. So with that selected, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a solidify modifier, and I'm going to put this in the middle, 0, 0.01, let's say 0.005. I'll make it kind of tiny like that. Notice that we do have a little bit of problem. All these different, we don't really want all those subdivisions. Let's go back to our screw. Let's make this 1. And we're also always going to need to go under normals and say calculate order for this when we do it this way. So now we have this done, and as we can see, it looks pretty good. I'm going to tab back into it. And one of these vertices that doesn't have any bevel weight, I'm going to Shift D and grab that and drop it in here, and then say E, Z, and drop it down. Make sure I'm going in the right direction, which I am. So this is now another parting line, and I can say Shift D on this and move it along the Y, and I can make this maybe something like this. So now I'm cutting through at this point, and I might move it just a little bit more over like this, and this one I might move over like that. So yeah, maybe I'll leave this one like this and this one over like that. So that's kind of how we'll do it. Let's take this. So you can see right now I'm able to play around and figure out exactly how I want these to go. The last one I'll do is I'll grab another one of these that doesn't have any bevel weight, and I'll say Shift D, and let's build something on the bottom. Let's go E up to something like this, and then say E Y all the way down over to here, and then we'll go back E, bring it down like this, and we'll grab these two, and we'll give these a mean bevel weight of 0.5, so they have kind of the same radius, so you can see what's going on there. It's working out good. We do have some smoothing artifacts, so I'm going to right click on this, say shade smooth, and then say Q auto smooth, and that'll get that to work correctly for us. And then with this selected, I'll select the capsule shape, and I will control minus, and now I've cut into them. And you'll see that I've got really a funky looking corrugated kind of cut. So I'm going to select back onto my capsule, and I'm going to basically go over to my vertices and make sure in my normals that auto smooth is turned on. And now we have exactly what we've been looking for. Now at this point, I can continue to edit these. I can continue to change anything I want in this. I just tab into here. And if I want, I can move this back. It'll be a little slower. And sometimes it get too slow. And so when that happens, I'll go into my object here, my capsule, and go into the modifiers, and I'll say viewport viz, and I'll just basically, that'll hide all these. And this is called the modifier tools, and it's in your add-ons. You can turn it on, and it puts them up there. Now when I go in here and tab, and I start moving things around, it's much, much more responsive. So that's just something to know. So now what we've done is we've created, let's put viewport viz back on, and now we've created a pretty good breakout of our parts. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to need to skin this, and we need to do some other things that are going to allow us to break some of these things apart. So let's look at that next. Okay, so now here we are with our capsule, with our cutouts, and now we need to actually skin it, or actually put a solidify on it, so that we can actually break these things apart into their own separate objects. So the way we do this is we're going to select our object, and I'm going to turn the viewport viz again. I'll turn them off, and then I'll go into kind of a side view and basically look at our X-ray mode, and I'm going to add a solidify, and I want it to actually go on the outside, not on the inside. And I'm going to tell you about that here in just a little bit, but we'll have it go on the outside, and we'll look at it and see we've got some problems over here. So we have a little crease going on. Why is that? That's because we have our auto smooth set to 30. So let's set it up a little bit higher, maybe like 179. That should do pretty good. So now that we have that set, we'll get rid of that. And as you can see, our solidify now is about that thick. So that's going to be the thickness of our actual object. So once that's done, go back into our modifiers, and we still are having a bit of a problem. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to move this solidifier above this boolean, meaning we want to solidify before we cut into it. And so when we do that, we're going to get this, but we do have a little bit of the same errors that we had before. So let's go back to 40 here, and now this looks just perfect. Okay, and so now the next thing I want to do is I want to take this basic shape. I'm going to call this our chamber, and I want to shift D, duplicate it, and then right click, and I want to call this chamber parting, and I'll turn that off for now. I'm going to select our chamber. We will apply all of these modifiers one at a time. I can just hit apply all. So now that that's done, I can tab into this, and I can do things like hit the L button, and that's going to be our door. So I will say P selection, tab out of that, and that's door. So I'm going to go and call this chamber door. And then the rest of this is just the chamber base. And I can go ahead now and let's go ahead and apply some surfaces, some materials to this. So I'll go into KitOps, and I'll use the free materials that comes with KitOps, and I'm going to grab plastic, and I'll take something like dark shiny, and I'm going to add the material to our chamber, and there's our dark shiny. And now I'm going to deselect everything else, and I'm going to grab a medium matte. I'm going to add that material, and that's just adding to the scene. And then I'll grab this, and I'll go into our special mattes, and we have this CW glass universe, and I'm going to basically add that material. And this is a pretty cool material because it's a glass material that works both in EV and in cycles, and it does a really good job. Okay, so now with that done, let's go into here and let's tab into this, and I'm going to hit the 3 key and hit L here, and then L and L. And these I'm going to actually come in here, and I'm going to add a new slot and assign them, and we're going to use that matte material that we loaded into the scene previously. And we'll tab out of that, and there it is. And so you can see we have this kind of a matte material down below, and we have this shiny material out back. And I might actually take this matte material and change the color. So I'll come in here to this and just say, let's make it a little darker, something like that. So, and now we're good. Now, one of the problems is that, as you can see that we have this thickness now that we have, but you can see all the way through these parting lines, and that's the part that we don't like. I'm going to come in here, and this other chamber, the chamber parting, I'm going to turn that back on. The chamber parting, remember, is going to have all of these same modifiers. I want to solidify, but I want that to be reversed. So instead of offset 1, I'm going to make it offset -1. So that means it's going to fit inside. Can you see that it's already fitting inside here? I'm going to tab into this now, and I really just don't want these vertices. I can select this and hit L. I don't want those vertices, and I don't want these vertices, and that's good. And then what I want to do is I need to cut through with this. So I will turn off the solidify for that object, and you'll see that we're cutting right through. That works pretty good. So now all I need to do is I select chamber parting and say apply all. Now it's selected them. I can come back here and just delete this last thing out. And you can see that now we have pretty good. I'm going to take my guy here. I'm going to slide him down a little bit so he's kind of, as long as his feet aren't intersecting, I can bring him down just a little more so we can kind of see him. This, I can Alt-G, and it's going to lay him right back down. And you can see, now the only last thing we need to do is take this chamber parting, and let's go back into our kit ops special materials. And I'm going to grab this black material and just say add material. And so that puts a black parting line in there, gives us that little black area. Okay, so that's it for creating a hibernation chamber out of Metaballs. And then of course from here you want to go ahead and start detailing it out further, but this gives you basically a good start on how to use Metaballs and modifiers to create your own design. Thanks for watching.